you on that. Can you go ahead and open us up in prayer? Amen. All right, Psalm 32. Ty, is it up and working? Is it showing anything on YouTube? It's very loud? Okay. Well, I don't know what to do about that. Okay, people can just turn their volume down. Sorry, virtual people. All right, Psalm 32. Our text tonight is going to be in verse 8. It says, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. This is what we're looking at, is decision making. I'll be honest, Pastor, when he told me the topic that I'd be covering, there were a lot of emotions that came up because it's such a deep topic to study, and it's really hard to figure out just 3 sections of decision making to cover. This first one is the one I struggled with the most. The next 2 weeks, piece of cake, or not really, but the next 2 weeks, I've known for a while what those were going to look like, Lord willing, of course. But this week, it's going to be a lot of treading through deep mud to get to the point where we can understand decision making. We have to set a strong foundation. And so the first 2 weeks are going to be mindset related. And then the third week will be more practical. Roger Crawford, a motivational speaker. Apparently he's in the Hall of Fame of motivational speakers. I didn't know there was such a thing, but now I want to be in it, so I don't know. But Roger Crawford said, we are the choices we make, not the circumstances we face. And what little I saw of him, it was clear that he had some sort of disability, but he didn't allow it to control his life. When it comes to decisions and choices that we make, they are the reason we are here today. You are the sum total of the decisions you've made to get you to this point. Now, there are circumstances and obstacles that'll come and maybe divert the path a little bit, but the way you respond to those is who you are today. So I want to give you a quick overview of what the next 3 weeks are going to look like. Today we're looking at the basis of our decisions. Obviously, we're going to reach the conclusion, Lord willing, that it should be God's will. The basis of our decisions should be, what does God want? And then I'm going to follow through on that. Next week, we're going to look at how can you know God's will. Here's a little spoiler alert, okay? God's not trying to hide his will from you. If he has something he wants you to do, it would be illogical to say, oh, I really want them to do this thing, but I don't want them to know about it. It's a secret. Shh. Like, that's not how God behaves. That's not how God works with men. He makes his will clear to us. And so looking at next week, we're going to look at how we can find God's will in our own lives. And then the third week is going to be the practical application. And more or less it's going to look like questions that we need to ask as we make decisions. The questions that will help inform us as to which decision is correct or incorrect. As I mentioned earlier, this is a field that's deeper than you can imagine. I'm coming at it from the sales and marketing side. I've done some marketing courses in my past, found out that I really hate marketing, and then I decided to get into sales. And it's the ugly other side of the same coin, basically. But sales and marketing, they've probably done, honestly, the best studies on human behavior that you can find. The reason is because they want your money. And so they study you to find out how to get your money. Most of my training in sales has been how to get people to make decisions. Now, I'm no expert at it. Otherwise, my financial situation would be much different than it is today. But I have learned a thing or two along the way. So let me tell you a story just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. Years ago, and if memory serves me correctly, this was back in the 80s or 90s, back in the phone booth days, before, yeah, well, I grew up I was born in 91, so I still sort of remember phone booths, and the brick size cell phones and things like that, yeah, that's true. So back in those days, before high-speed internet and things like that, Target put out an ad campaign, and a father came into a particular Target store and was just livid. He was yelling, screaming for the manager to come. And so they brought the manager forward, and he's holding a book of coupons. And he said to the manager, he's like, did you send this to my daughter? She's not even out of high school yet. It was several coupons about baby items. He's like, are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant? She's not even graduated high school yet. He was so angry, and the manager apologized profusely, said, I'm so sorry. Target's not trying to push that on. We don't want to promote teenage pregnancy. That's not our message at all. I'm so sorry about this. And then a few days later, the manager called to apologize again. And the dad was extremely embarrassed. And he said, honestly, I should be apologizing to you. I didn't know what was going on under my own roof. I talked to my daughter, and she's due in August. Target knew that she was pregnant before her father knew she was pregnant. And the reason is Target figured out they hired a bunch of data analysts to research buying habits. And they could tell, according to what items the customer bought, they could tell where they were and what stage of life they were in. They especially wanted to target pregnancy because that's the gold mine of retail. And so think about this for a second. Diapers. And I'm getting into some weeds here, but diapers are a loss leader. The stores don't make money on diapers. They lose money on diapers. But what they do is they set them at such a low price, and then they put them in the back of the store for a couple of reasons. The person who's buying diapers is a parent of a young baby, and so they're tired and exhausted. And so they put it at the back of the store, so you have to walk through the whole store to get to it. And then once you're back there, you're like, I might as well just buy everything else I need for the week. And then you go through your groceries and get that. Or I might as well buy these clothes while I'm here. And so they put those at the back of the store so that tired shoppers going to purchase baby items would then be manipulated into buying more items throughout the store. That was before the advent of high-speed internet and social media and all of this. It's gotten to insane levels now. So how many of you have ever had some conversation about a randomly specific thing, and then you open your Facebook page or you open something related to Google Ads, and all of a sudden you're like, hold on, my phone was listening to me, or Alexa was listening to my conversation. The reality of that is actually a little scarier than them listening to your conversations. It's actually predictive analytics, where they can tell what you're going to be thinking about before you get to that point. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe there are some things that are listening, but the Facebook ads, the way they work, is that they can tell by the conversations you have on your social media, or by the items you search for on Google, or the videos you watch on YouTube. They can tell what you're interested in, and they can predict when you'll be interested in it, so that they can target you at your most vulnerable state. Marketing is crazy scientific, and it's all about targeting the most vulnerable person at the most vulnerable time. Case in point, my favorite fast food restaurant, I could tell you right now, is Fazoli's. Does anyone know Fazoli's? Fazoli's is amazing. The closest one to us is in Columbia, South Carolina. It's really far, but it's almost worth the trip because you get unlimited breadsticks that are just dripping with butter and salt. They are carriers of obesity, and it's delicious. Fazoli's is amazing, okay? There isn't one around here. Yes, we're all going right after this. No. The marketing people, they know that that's what I want. They also know that I'm bent towards entrepreneurial endeavors. That's a tongue twister. I like business, and I like building businesses and seeing how that grows. I'm fascinated by that. So guess what I got an ad for? Extremely specific. Start your own Fazoli's franchise with no money down. And it seems like a great deal. I don't want to sacrifice 5 years of my life for breadsticks. And Ty was right. If we did that, we'd get really, really fat. So it's a sacrifice I'm having to make for my well-being and my marriage. But it's an extremely specific ad. Another thing that came up right before I drove here tonight was, now hear me out before I let me give the full story. All of a sudden, I'm getting all sorts of these mental wellness ads, and for people suffering with chronic depression and things like that. And the reason is, I looked up a specific hormone called serotonin, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I wanted to understand it a little bit more before I said anything about it. And serotonin is a hormone that controls your mood. And so if you have low levels of serotonin, you have a high probability of depression. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting all of these mental health counseling hotlines. all because I typed about it in this document on Google Docs. And so there are plenty of illustrations. I won't get too far into it. Just know, like, even politicians have received some major fines because they're now using social media to manipulate you to vote one way or another, especially if you're in that area where you're close to on the fence or an indecisive person. So the question we're studying today is, how can I have personal victory in my decision making? We need to understand a few things before we can get to the part where we're having victory in our decision making. Like I said before, we need to build a foundation. We need to have the right mindset before we can understand what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing, and then how we can do better. So tonight we're just going to look at a few things. First of all, we're looking at the reasons we make poor decisions. Secondly, we're looking at what are the determining factors in poor decision making. And then what should be the determining factors in my decisions. So first of all, the reasons we make poor decisions. There are two types of decision makers, and I've heard them classified as several different things. For simplicity's sake, we're calling them thinkers and doers. Those are the two very broad umbrellas of decision making. And if you want to know what you are, you're going to have a personal exam, and you don't have to report to the class, okay? But test yourself. On a scale of 1 to 10, how quickly do you make a decision about where you're going to eat out for a restaurant when you're choosing a restaurant? 1 to 10. One being you don't even have to think about it. You already know you're going to Cookout 100% of the time. Or 10 being, you know what? We're going to miss a couple of meals trying to decide where we're going to eat. I won't tell you where Ty is on that scale. Actually, unfortunately, she and I are probably on the same side of the scale, which makes it doubly difficult to ever get anywhere. All right, so if you can think of a number between 1 and 10 on how hard it is to make a choice. If you're in the 1 to 5 category, meaning you're a quick decision maker, I have bad news for you. You are bad at decision making. But the good news is you are happy in the bad decisions that you make. But on the scale of 6 to 10, you're better at decision making, meaning you're thinking through the options and the possible outcomes. But you're always unhappy with the decisions you've made. Not always, but you're generally unhappy with the decisions you make because you're like, well, man, I thought about Cookout, but what about Fazoli's? I could have gone there. I could have gotten breadsticks and pasta instead of this greasy cheeseburger. What was I thinking? You're always unhappy, not always, but you're generally unhappy in those decisions that you make. That kind of tells you where you're coming from. A go-to rule that I have in my life is if it can be measured, it can be improved. So if you can define it, if you can understand it, you can improve it. When you're looking at losing weight, the easiest way to lose weight, not that I can be a good example of this, but is you count calories. This is the simplistic way of doing it. You count the calories. If you come in, the goal is to come in 500 calories under the amount of calories that you burn for the day. You eat 500 calories less. At that rate, you'll lose about a pound a week. If you can measure it, you can better it. With this, what we're trying to do tonight is be able to understand our mindset in making decisions. And if we can measure, if we can understand it, then we can take that first step into having victory in decision making. So it was a good thing last week that Jonathan started with victory in habits, because habits are a great determining factor in our decisions. The habits that we have in our life, the hardwired habits make up the majority of our decisions during the day. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I believe it was 293 decisions every day are made about food. Specifically food. Total decisions in a day about everything averages out to about 35,000. The majority of our decisions throughout the day are made because of hardwired habits. We don't even think about these decisions, we just react and do them. And those habits are formed more or less by specific hormones that we have and the reward hormones and how we react to those reward hormones. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on this, I hope, but there are 4 basic reward hormones. The first one is oxytocin. The first one we're discussing. Oxytocin, it's the love hormone that is important for things such as the parent-child bond. It's vital for building trust, empathy, and bonding in any relationship. And this hormone level is increased with physical affection, among other things like trust. Serotonin, the mood regulator. Low levels of serotonin cause physical and emotional reaction of depression. When at healthy levels, serotonin reduces anxiety and increases happiness. And generally, the best way to increase serotonin in your life, and many of you are going to love this answer, healthy sleep. Sleep is the best way to regulate that, the easiest way. Endorphins, the third reward hormone that we're talking about. It's the pain relief hormone. There are several applications of endorphins in the body, but basically it comes down to pain relief and pleasure enhancement. And those are the major symptoms of a healthy levels of endorphins. This is increased with exercise or doing happy things like laughing. And so a lot of laughter gives you a lot of high levels of endorphins, which are good. And then the one that really hardwires our habits is dopamine. Dopamine is, it's something that needs to be talked about more. It short circuits a lot of society. Most of society is stuck in this dopamine-induced craze where we just keep seeking that instant gratification. Dopamine is the instant reward hormone. Without getting too much into the philosophy of parenting, because I don't have kids, but just know this, from a scientific viewpoint, increased screen time is one way to short-circuit your reward system. And coming from a guy who grew up on video games, television, music, fast food, pornography, extreme sports, the high you get from the almost hitting the danger zone, those things all cause a dopamine reaction within your brain, and it short circuits you to keep seeking out that same behavior over and over and over again. Dopamine is it's what causes addiction, and it's a very dangerous hormone when it's not in its proper levels, and it's just something to be aware of. Like, this thing is causing an instant gratification reward. Don't keep going back to that, or else it will control you. And as a child of God, I will be under the control of nothing but God. Hardwired habits are the reason we make most of our poor decisions. Another one is a short-sighted viewpoint. Short-sightedness. We're not weighing out the long-term outcomes. Just think about the standard bad decision illustration tonight as eating fast food, because it's the reality of my life. The bad decision to eat that junk food doesn't weigh in the fact that it has long-term effects on my health, my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health. it doesn't weigh in those effects. And then too much of that can cause great irreparable harm. And so not looking at the long-term outcomes is one of the reasons that we end up making a lot of bad mistakes. We get really busy making decisions about the trees, and we forget that there's a whole forest in front of us. And so that's something to be aware of. Another one is improper values. Again, back to that illustration of junk food. I look at that junk food and I say, you know what? The instant dopamine boost that I get from that, the instant gratification of a delicious meal, that's more valuable to me than my physical health or my stamina or my not having to buy too many clothes at Walmart because I can't fit in my old one. Like the instant reward of that is a higher value to me than these other things. And so an improper value system, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of our mindset work on, is having the right values, having the right vision. And then here's one that I think a lot of people fall into this category, is no preparation or lack of preparation. So we exercise to get stronger because one day a car might drive over someone we love and we need to be able to pick that car up and throw it off of them to protect them. We cannot expect that in the moment of emergency that we'll be able to summon a strength that has not been developed. Now, it does happen randomly, but it cannot be relied on. We cannot expect that in the moment of need, we'll have the strength to open that pickle jar. We cannot expect that if we haven't developed the strength, developed the muscles. And when it comes to making wise decisions, we cannot expect to summon wisdom where there is no source. We cannot expect to say, you know what, I'll know what to do when the moment comes. Because that's gambling. And it's gambling with zero chance of winning. Assuming willpower and wisdom will suddenly appear when the need arises is the reason a lot of people make bad decisions, because they haven't prepared themselves. They haven't exercised their decision-making muscles. And so when the moment comes, they just go with the easiest choice or the instant reward choice, rather than thinking through it logically as they should. If we prepare, which is what we're trying to do these next 3 weeks, if we prepare well, and then you're going to have to take this study home and develop these muscles yourself. If we prepare well, if and when the time arises, we will be better equipped. And we won't have to be victims of our circumstances. So there are some determining factors in poor decision making. These are more or less the foundation of our poor decisions. The first one is emotion. Okay? This statistic is really disheartening. Multiple studies have been done, and they've reached the same conclusion that 90% of the decisions we make in a day are driven by emotion, not logic. So 90% of 35,000 decisions in a day, that's a lot. You do the math. I don't have access to my calculator. But 90% of those 35,000 decisions are based upon emotion. The problem with emotion is it's victim to circumstance. So if you feel good in the moment, you'll make a decision that continues that feeling. But if you feel bad in the moment, you will react out of that bad feeling. Emotions are like a roller coaster. It's up and down, and it's just victim to wherever the track takes it. If we make decisions based on emotion, we make irrational decisions. Another reason that a lot of people make decisions and they're all kind of tied in together. But pain. So in my sales training, I was taught, and I found it to be true, pain is the number one determining factor in getting people to buy. And my job as a salesperson is to make the pain of buying less than the pain of not buying. I'm trying to convince them that the product I have is so much better than the price, and it's worth the time it takes to implement this new product into their workflow. Coming from a software perspective. Switching software, especially data management software, I know this is boring, but it's a tedious process. And it's my job to make it sound more exciting. It's to say, this is going to improve this, and this. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring out pain points and say, okay, well, I understand that you have this pain because your current solution is outdated, or you're using pen and paper, and that's got to take a lot of time. And then you can lose files behind the desk. And so I have to make their pain of their current solution greater than the pain of not having, or greater than the pain of purchasing ours. And so that's how the decision making is a bit manipulated. And so you can tell when you go into a car dealership that they're trying to make the pain of purchasing the new vehicle less than the pain of purchasing, less than the pain of not having this new vehicle. And if you listen to them talk, they'll still manipulate you, but I mean, you'll know how they're doing it while they do it. That's what happened to me when I bought my car. It's like, I know what he's doing. Okay, I'll sign. So that's just how it works. Another reason that people make decisions and poor decisions is fear. Fear of missing out is a big one. In the investment world, a lot of people buy stocks when they're at their peak in price because they have a fear of missing out because we don't know what's coming up next. And hey, it might go way up higher. And so, yeah, I know it's more expensive than it was yesterday, but I need to buy it before it gets even more valuable. And so the fear of missing out is a big one. Fear of the unknown is more or less the general description of what we're talking about here. I don't know what's up ahead, and so I'm afraid because I don't know. It could be the worst possible outcome. I don't know. And so if I react based on that fear, decisions made in fear are always bad decisions. Every time, okay? If I react because of fear, I will make a bad decision. And so when the phrase goes, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, so when you get nervous, step forward. When I get afraid, I don't need to make decisions based on that emotion of fear. Now, there are wise things. My wife is afraid of snakes, okay? It's a wise thing not to go up to a snake and try to pet its tongue. Like, hey, little snakey, because that's not going to end well. Yeah. Based on wisdom, it's wise to avoid that behavior. But reacting out of fear will always cause us to make irrational decisions. When fear controls our decisions, they will be irrational decisions. And they'll lead us to destructive tendencies. Another one is peer pressure, and this is a bit of all of the above combined into one. I can't do this because what will my friends say, or what will my family say? Or what will people think about me if I make this decision? Other people's opinions of you cannot be a determining factor in your choices. They are just as fallible as you are. And so you can't base your life off of the opinions of other people. Peer pressure is not a reason to make decisions. Another one, and I'll stop at the options with this, but money. And this comes down to pain. It comes down to fear. If I'm afraid of losing money, or if the only positive aspect of a decision is that I'll make more money, it's a bad decision. Money is a currency. It's a way to magnify your personality and different decisions, but it doesn't better your life. It doesn't make anything better. It just makes it more of whatever it is. Poverty and riches, they both magnify the personality of the person. They magnify the situation. But it should never be a determining factor in your decisions. Now, do I need a job? Yes. But I don't need a job to get money. I need a job to provide for my family. I need a job to make an impact. I need a job for other reasons. The money is a consequence of those decisions. And so if money is the only positive in a decision, it's a bad decision. Don't chase money. And we could go on and on and on for reasons that people make bad decisions. Really what we're looking at is how to make good decisions. This is what we want to do, right? So we need a trusted source. Proverbs 11:14, where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Proverbs 12:15, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes. That's important. The fool thinks he's always right. The way that he goes, the decisions he makes, they're right in his own eyes. But he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. Proverbs 15:22, without counsel purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors they are established. So the goals that we have, if we proceed without counsel, those goals will be disappointed. They will fail. They'll come short. But in a multitude of counselors, there will be success there. So I need to find a good, trusted source of help in decision making. The one thing I know is I cannot trust my own heart. We talked about emotions being a bad foundation for decisions. Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? If I have this person that I know, they're deceitful above all things, and they're a desperately wicked person, how often am I going to go to them for advice? Hopefully never, right? So why do I go to my own heart for advice? Well, how do I feel about this? Well, what do I think is best? It's a foolish source when left to its own. I can't trust my heart, and knowing that I'm surrounded by humans, no offense, I can't trust the hearts of others because they have the same heart that I have. Jesus himself said in Mark 7:21 through 23, from within, out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, theft, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these things, all these evil things come from within and defile the man. I can't trust the heart of other men. I can't trust the heart of other people. Here's one source that I know I can trust. And see if you can guess who it is. I can trust the heart of God. Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all thine ways, or with all thine heart, lean not unto thy own understanding, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. That's the kind of person I want directing me. Someone who has only the best intentions for me. And someone who is that source of unlimited wisdom. James 1:5. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, which giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. God is the source of wisdom, and if we need wisdom, we go to him, and he will give it. So if he's the source of wisdom, and he promises that if we trust in him with all our heart, he'll direct our paths, and he promises that he only has thoughts of peace and not of evil towards us, he's a good source of wisdom. He's a good source of decision making. James 3:17. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. That's a source of wisdom that I want to rely on. Then Philippians 4:6-7. When it comes to us making decisions, here's the guiding principle. Be careful for nothing, or be anxious about nothing. Don't worry. But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. If we're lost in a way, and we need to know which direction to choose. Unfortunately, it's typically not path A or path B. It's path C, D, E, F, G, all the way down the line. Unfortunately, we often get caught when there's so many multiple outcomes and so many multiple paths that we can follow. If we trust the source of wisdom, if we trust in him, he'll direct our paths. Once we find this trusted source, the heart of God, it only makes sense to then listen and follow. Psalm 37:23, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. What that means is the steps of a good man are preserved. They're protected. They're upheld by the Lord. Meaning, a man who is standing on the edge of a steep pathway, the Lord is upholding his feet. Though he fall, he will not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. The Lord is there leading us in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. The paths that David was alluding to when talking in shepherding terms, there are these very narrow pathways on the sides of different hills and mountains that for a normal person would be treacherous, extremely difficult to walk up. But the shepherd who knows the paths of righteousness can lead the sheep in such a way that their feet won't slip and fall. And if we trust the good shepherd, he will lead us in those paths of righteousness. Psalm 121 verse 3, he will not suffer or allow thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. If we trust in God, he will direct us. He won't allow us to be moved. He doesn't quit on us. Just listen and follow the ultimate source of wisdom. Now, as we look towards next week, and I got done a lot earlier than I was expecting, and it's a pleasant surprise because, we're going to Fazoli's. But as we look towards next week, we're going to look at how I can know God's will in my life. The whole point of this lesson tonight was to say, I need to know God's will in my life. God's will should be the determining factor in my decisions, not my emotions, not fear, not money, not peer pressure, not any of these things, but the will of God. That is why I make the decisions that I make. Next week, we're going to look at how I can find God's will for my life. Like I said in the beginning, he's not hiding it from you. He's not playing a game like, only the smart people will find out my will, or only the crafty. It's not that way at all. He wants you to know his will. He hasn't hidden it from you. And there are some very clear guidelines within Scripture that help us know God's will for our life. The first one, though, when it comes to decision making, the first question we should ask is, what does God want? And the first thing he wants is 1 Timothy 2:3-4. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior, who will have all men to be saved and to come unto the knowledge of truth. The first step into knowing God's will is to knowing the knowledge, having that knowledge of truth, knowing the Lord as our personal Savior. That's God's, the first step, the first thing that he wants is us to know him, to have that personal relationship with him. If that doesn't exist, then we're going to be left up to our own devices and decision making. In our choices, it will just be based on our emotion, our habits, or what have you. But if we know God, we have the first step into knowing his will. So before we close and go play volleyball with the teens or whatever, are there any questions or comments that you all have? I'll open the floor up. I can't answer everything, but I can talk. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. It's good. All right. Anyone else? Yes. Sure. Cool. Absolutely. Yeah, that is exciting for sure. Nice. I like it. Hey, Ryan, do you want to pray for Michelle's request and then close us here in prayer?